Hey everyone, welcome back to Capital Connection. I'm Conan Smith. I'm the president and CEO of the Michigan Environmental Council, and I am so excited to be with you again. I love doing these webinars, and I particularly love them when they are on a topic that I have a personal passion for. We do a lot of topics, Jim and Carolyn, where I'm actually learning. They're new to me, right? So I get to meet a guest and explore a topic that I haven't come across. And today to talk with you two about something that has been so near and dear to me for so many years. I'm over the moon for this topic. So everyone, we are really blessed to be joined by two of the staff members from one of our best and most prestigious member organizations, the Groundwork Institute for Center for Resilient Communities, excuse me. And Groundwork has been based in Traverse City for the last several years, but they have been doing work all across northern Michigan. And you may know them in the advocacy world for the incredible work they do on 10 cents per meal, which helps bring fresh foods into our schools all over the state, a program that could not happen without the good work of your colleagues up north. I started working with Groundwork back when it was called the Michigan Land Use Institute. And the guy, Kelly Thayer, who's now with For Love of Water, he and I started the first land use and transportation program in the state. And we learned pretty quickly that the integration of those two topics, land use and transportation, is essential to building strong, viable, vibrant communities. And that Michigan had lost a lot of ground. We used to be on the forefront of the integration of public transportation into our urban spaces, but as we became the auto state, many of the structures for mass transit that we had built were disassembled. And Groundwork became one of the leading voices for reestablishing these networks of bus and rail and non-motorized transportation. And one of the signature projects that they've been working on for better than a decade now is connecting Traverse City and the city of Ann Arbor. Joined today by Jim Bruckbauer, who has been leading this project since its inception, and Carolyn Ulstad, who's a transportation expert with their team. Jim, Caroline, thank you so much for joining us. I'm so glad to have you guys here.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Conan. It's great to talk to you this morning, and yeah, we really appreciate the opportunity to chat.
It's such a cool project. Let's set the stage. So you guys have been doing this kind of work about bringing up the value of excellent transportation to resilient, healthy, sustainable communities for a long time. How did you get into this? What did you see that was happening that built that passion for you?
Yeah, I'll take that one, Carolyn. So, or at least I'll start. You can jump in after me. But yeah, as you were alluding to, Conan, to us at the Groundwork Center, a resilient community is one where you can meet your daily needs without solely depending on a car. Throughout our history, and yeah, Conan, you almost said Michigan Land Use Institute when you introduced us, so that was good. That was,
yeah, I still do. It's funny too. When I talk about projects between Groundwork and MEC, I will say we're doing this, and I still don't know which organization I'm talking about.
Right, right. So yeah, as Conan mentioned, yeah, many of our MEC friends and followers certainly may know us by our previous name, the Michigan Land Use Institute, but yeah, we have always throughout our history advocated for building communities in ways where people can walk, bike, bus to meet their daily needs. And we've always advocated for improving our rail lines that serve and connect Michigan's cities to the rest of the country. In fact, the Michigan Land Use Institute put out a report back in 2002, and I wish I have a copy around somewhere, but it's from 2002, and it really made the case for making passenger rail part of modernizing Michigan's transportation system and making it part of the new mobility strategy for the state. And so we probably partnered with MEC back then on that report. 20 years ago, if you were to walk into the Michigan Department of Transportation and ask someone for the passenger rail department, they would have looked at you with a blank stare. But all that has changed over the past decade or so. The focus for the Michigan Department of Transportation is a lot more on mobility and transit, and they have a long-term plan and a full staff behind a passenger rail investment. So we're excited to see some of that change and that shift from just in the past couple decades.
Carolyn, what brings you to this issue? Like why public transportation? Why this project?
So, you can start thinking about what the rest of the state looks like. So I grew up in the Holland area, so I had a passenger rail service, especially having family. We had family in Chicago, so we were able to easily access via train. So when you look at the state of Michigan, you have the main metro cities, Detroit, Ann Arbor, Lansing, Kalamazoo, Grand Rapids. They all have passenger rail service. So when you're really looking at the state holistically, you see that everything's to the south. When you're looking at mid-Michigan, northern Michigan, we do not have a rail line. So it's really just connecting the state better and seeing that we do have a need here because there's half the state that's not connected. So that's a main need.
I'll throw in too, increasingly, we're considering the impacts of climate change on the population of the state as climate migration takes hold. I know up in northern Michigan, you're already experiencing some of this in terms of wealthier people from California and Florida purchasing property, maybe not living there yet, often just having a house, building a house that is empty for a lot of the year. But at some point, I expect that Michigan's going to become more of a magnet for climate migrants. And we really need to have our communities connected in ways that don't exacerbate the environmental impact of that population growth. Is that part of your marketing strategy or your thought process?
Yeah, I can just jump in with one piece on the environmental side of things. From an environmental standpoint, transportation accounts for the largest greenhouse gas emissions in the United States, and light duty vehicles makes up the largest of that pie. So when we're really thinking about how the train can help with the environmental side of things, it's reducing those on-road car emissions. And it's just much more efficient at moving people in a more sustainable way.
So one of the big solution sets that you've come up with is connecting northern Michigan to southeast Michigan. How did that come about? And what are you looking at the solution set as? And how does that matter to Groundworks and your mission?
Yeah, I can maybe just start off here again with this piece. So in particular, we saw this particular route that we're suggesting as a potential solution. Mainly, one of the big reasons why is because the state still owns this active rail line and that connects Southeast Michigan to the Traverse City-Petoskey region. And the tracks are still in fairly good shape. So right now, freight products are being shipped along the route. And as part of the project, we're exploring the potential for passenger service that could work well with freight. Oh, perfect, you have the map up. So this route here, kind of in that, north-south there, being owned by the state is a game changer. And I think that can help us really kind of make those goals happen because of that.
Yeah, and I was going to say just down the route, the line also connects to the other east-west passenger rail lines. And we feel it's especially important for the mid and northern Michigan regions to connect to down to the Detroit-Chicago Amtrak line, which is a line that has seen, really hundreds of millions of dollars of investment over the past decade to make trains go faster and have more reliable train service. And so we thought, the fact that the state still owns this corridor and the tracks are in pretty good shape, and it also connects to some of these east-west lines, that's what really, that's where the route came from. If we were starting from scratch and trying to build a new route, would that exactly be the route? Not sure, but this is an opportunity that we thought was pretty unique because of the set of circumstances around it.
I really appreciate that framing, because one of the questions that people raise immediately is like, why doesn't this go to Lansing? Right? But that's the reason, because the track already exists in another place and it's already publicly owned track. And those are really important cost considerations when you're thinking about developing a new route.
That's
Conan,
correct.
yeah.
And that doesn't mean we can't expand in the future into other areas and have better connections between more cities and this route. But we thought in this case, we don't have to purchase the right of way and we don't have to put in new infrastructure. And those are, like you said, Conan, some of the major costs when you're thinking about a big project like this. So we thought this is a great opportunity to get started.
Now, as a guy who was born and raised in Ann Arbor and went to the University of Michigan, I think the solution for the state really would be simply to move the capital to my town, and it would solve a lot of those problems.
That's right.
And when you're talking about solving problems, you mentioned the environmental side of things, right? So this can help kind of solve some environmental CO2 issues. But there are other things that the rail line can help solve. So first of all, kind of the most obvious, transportation, things related to transportation. This is a form of transportation, but it can reduce the congestion on local streets and highways, and therefore making, therefore lowering vehicle crashes and making our roads safer. Economically, it can help develop our mid-Michigan downtowns. And then even from a social aspect, we can think about the train as adding the train can become a more equitable way to get around the state, right? And we can think of that from a racial perspective. We can think about that with people that have medical disabilities, or even as a young woman traveling alone. I would much rather take a train. I'd feel safer, especially at night or something like that. So we can think of it from all these different perspectives on all these different issues we want to solve. And we really see that this can help.
There are a couple questions already from the audience that I'd love to dig into with you guys. As we do that, we're going to get into some of the technical aspects of this. So folks in the audience, I want you to know if we can't get to your question today, we'll work with Jim and Carolyn to make sure that we get your question answered in the follow-up email that you'll get following this webinar. And Jim and Carolyn, if the questions are too technical and you don't have the answers at your fingertips today, just say that, and we'll make sure that we get it in the follow-up, because I know I didn't ask you to bring your laptops and file cabinets to the thing today. We talked a little bit already about the factors in determining where the route is going to go. What about the environmental assessments that might need to happen on these routes that are not currently used for passenger rail? Like, we're going to need things like new stations, right? So there is some development that happens. We might want to upgrade the speed of the track in some places. Can you talk about the significance, the environmental significance of the development of this route, and what kinds of impacts you anticipate, and how you're seeking those out right now?
I could jump in there, Carolyn. So the nice part about this project is, like we've talked about, how the rail infrastructure is already in place. So because we're talking about using existing infrastructure, the environmental review process would not be as extensive as if we were building a new rail line or a new set of tracks, or like when new roads are installed. And so that's not to say that there's not going to be an environmental impact. There will be, and we will be evaluating that, but the process, the review process is not as extensive. And we believe like you mentioned, yeah, the station analysis will be a pretty big part of this next phase, because that will guide how the train service will interact with the communities along the line, and the locations of where people will be getting on and off a train will be really important, and the infrastructure and the transportation options that are going to be around those areas will be very important for making sure people can get to and from the station to their destinations. I mean, that's always a big question that comes up. Once people get on and off a train, or get off the train, where are they going to go, and how are they going to get home or wherever their destination is? And certainly in northern Michigan, people tend to want to, travel around the region. And so we're certainly looking at all those aspects. And that, I feel like that has a lot to do with the station analysis, which is then part of that infrastructure review process.
How about the possibility for increasing the speed? That is, Carolyn, you said like at the top of the mark before we started, 4-hour trip from Traverse City to Southeast Michigan, once you factor in stopping for gas and bodily functions, et cetera. That's a long time. Often a train ride is a little bit longer than the drive time, because of limitations on speed, needing to stop more frequently than you would if you were in a car. Have you given any thought to rail speeds, what they might be currently and what they might be in the future?
Yeah, so the initial study that was completed in 2018 did a pretty high level analysis of this whole idea, and we were able to work with many partners to get that completed. And it looked at the existing track conditions. It looked at what it would take to get trains going certain speeds, the potential ridership and the operating costs. And it looked at everything from 25-mile-per-hour trains to 110-mile-per-hour trains. So it gave a lot of different scenarios for what the service could look like. And we are pretty focused in this next phase of planning on the 60 to 80 mile per hour service, because we feel that if we could get trains going between the 60 and 80 mile per hour range along this corridor, which I believe is realistic, then we start to compete a little bit with traveling by car. It's going to be difficult for it to be faster than just, zooming up here by a car or zooming back and forth. But there could be other benefits to being able to just have this downtown to downtown direct connection, and be able to have, the train does actually have the right of way over roads when it is crossing a road. So you actually get a direct connection, which is kind of nice. You don't have to necessarily sit in traffic. So we're just looking at all of that, but the 60 to 80 mile per hour range is what we're going to focus on in this next phase.
I'll tell you, Jim, my COO and I came up to Traverse City last week on Thursday, and I begged him to drive because I needed to work. I was so far behind on things, right? And so Joe drove and I got to be productive in the car, but he was driving. If we'd have been able to hop on the train, even if it had taken a half hour longer, we'd have both been grateful for that, because we had the time to work instead. So I think there are definite trade-offs in any transportation option that we choose, but one of those is just how your individual time is being used, and rail provides some alternatives that we don't necessarily see in other modes. How about the prioritization process? So since Amtrak doesn't own the rails here, one of our guests is asking, the train is often late because passenger rail gets preempted by freight. Do you think you can change that on this route and make sure that it doesn't take 11 hours? Or we had this nightmare scenario. It was not related to freight, I should say, where folks were stuck on the train for almost a full day recently. That ruins the the return on investment, the value proposition, right? So what's the interaction between freight and passenger traffic on this route?
Yeah,
Yeah,
so one of the things with freight in particular with this route, especially when you get into mid-Michigan and northern Michigan, the freight's rather infrequent. So I know, Jim, maybe you can expand on that because you've had conversations with the freight entity before, and they've kind of alluded to that same idea that it's pretty flexible with usually the type of stuff that they're shipping. Is that correct?
Yeah, one of the things that is somewhat unique about the region and the products that are currently being shipped on the rail lines right now is that they're not time sensitive necessarily, as opposed to in some of the larger metro areas between Detroit and Chicago and some of these larger cities. A lot of the freight that's being shipped is time sensitive, and there's just one set of tracks, and therefore that's where you get some of those delay issues, and where sometimes the freight is prioritized over the passenger side. And on this route, as of right now, we're not anticipating that being an issue. There is potential that the passenger could take priority over the freight. And so we're looking at that will be part of what's evaluated in this, again, this next phase of planning is what are the investments needed that help both the freight and passenger rail potential into mid and northern Michigan. And then what are the investments needed that make them work together so that it's not a competition, but that we can safely get people efficiently between communities.
Can you talk a little bit about ridership projections too? Part of the initial study has to be like, was anyone going to use this? And that's a question that we get frequently in our shop. What's it look like from a passenger perspective?
Yeah, so the initial study, again, completed in 2018. It's a very thorough study. You can go to a2tc.org or the Groundwork Center website and try to find that, or maybe we could share that out.
We'll put it in the follow-up. Yep.
Yeah, as a follow-up. But the study team that worked on this had a very detailed analysis of travel patterns when they developed their ridership assessment. They took a few things and put them together. They looked at the existing travel demand models that are out there, which is kind of a wonky planning term that local transportation agencies use to kind of look at how people are traveling right now, and it kind of looks at how they travel in the future, or predicts how they'll travel in the future. It looked at vehicle trips right now, separated by mode and purpose. And then it looked at different socioeconomic growth projections, but in all the areas along the line. And then they do this like travel desirability analysis, which is some kind of formula they use to split out people's likelihood of driving versus taking a plane or train based on the cost and the travel time. And it's super complicated. It's interesting if you're really into that kind of stuff, but they were able to use all that data and compile it, put it together, and make some assumptions about who would likely be able to jump on a train. And it kind of, one of the things that was kind of interesting, it did confirm that there is a lot of travel between the regions for a lot of different purposes, for visitors, for business travel, for university travel. This is really a university corridor when you look at some of these cities and some of the colleges and universities that are along this route. And so with all this travel between these regions, they were able to look at some of the ridership projections that, again, we could share. One of the things that I do keep in mind, though, is, and that I'm excited about this next phase, is that a lot has changed since 2018. Travel has changed, and the whole world's changed. So one of the things that I'm excited about is that we will be in this next planning phase. Now that we can focus on exactly how the train service will work, we are going to have actually a more thorough analysis of potential ridership. And so I'm really excited about the fact that we can dig into the numbers a little bit more in the post-pandemic world and make some good assumptions there.
Carolyn, you all just facilitated a $2 million grant for a second round of feasibility studies here. What's the second study going to take us to?
Yeah, so the initial feasibility study looked at a few different potential scenarios for a train service, but now that we are able to move into the second phase, and I do want to also note that, we are not doing this alone as Groundwork. We have a really great partner in the Cadillac Wexford Transit Authority. They are actually the ones that hold the grant, and it's a $1.3 million grant through the USDOT. It's the Federal Transit Administration that will be running it. And then there is an additional $1 million in the state's budget. But I always do want to mention that because they are a great partner and we couldn't have done this and had this funding without them. But really this next study, it lays out the plan and it forces us to outline exactly what the train service will look like. So from there, we envision, once it's all kind of figured out, we envision some kind of entity being created that will be responsible for managing the process and will move forward the funding plan in the future. So this next phase is very looking at the capital, the operating, and then from there, we'll see who's going to steer it further.
Yeah, when did we lose Conan?
No, I'm still here, but my camera shut down on us though. Sorry about
no, that's all right. Zoom, yeah, never know what's going on in Zoom. So yeah, maybe just to build on that a little bit. One piece that will be very important in this next planning phase is to determine how, like, the management structure for how this will be operated. Like, is this going to be a nonprofit that's created? Is it a for-profit? Is this an expansion of an Amtrak line? And that's a key question to answer, because the structure of the entity that manages this will really drive how the train service will operate. And this planning phase will help. And I think many others would like to understand, like, is this going to be a viable service that doesn't have to depend on like public financial support, or what's this really going to look like? So that operating structure is going to be really important to us. I feel like it's an opportunity to get creative with different revenue and private funding structures that could be out there. But yeah, this next phase will be really important. It's not just an idea anymore. We're making the actual plan for it. And our goal as Groundwork is to really move this project far enough along where Groundwork no longer has to be the one that's kind of managing it. We're not interested in running a train. We have a lot of other things to do as a nonprofit and fulfill our mission. And so, we launch ideas and try to get them to a place where they can move forward without us. And so ideally for us, we're trying to get this to a place where there's another entity created that's responsible for the project and can move the idea into its next phases.
Well, you all have been providing really visionary leadership, and I have to say I've been so proud to be involved with this project, not just as an environmentalist, originally like affiliated with it, but Jim, I think you came to me when I was a Washtenaw County commissioner, and we got the county to invest in the initial study. I've been a big fan, just as a potential rider of it as well, and I'm incredibly grateful for the Groundwork leadership on this. The two of you have been such great advocates and allies and very wise leaders on this. And I wish you very good luck with the project as it moves forward.
Yeah, thank you. And I would just want to quick say, it's not us, it's the partnerships. It is MEC. You've been there alongside us this whole time, Michigan Association of Railroad Passengers. You were part of Washtenaw County, like you mentioned. There, a lot of the communities along the line are what prompted that initial study and getting that off the ground. There was financial support, there were letters of support, and we have a great champion in Lansing up here, Senator Wayne Schmidt, who's been a champion of rail, both freight and passenger, around the whole state. And so there's just a lot of people. It's not us. It's a real coalition.
That's really awesome. And the way that you guys do business, I know. So thank you for that. Hey, everyone, we are at the hour, unfortunately, so we're going to have to close this out. I know we did not get to most of the questions here, so look for an extensive follow-up. And the interest here, Jim, Caroline, suggests that we may be trying to bring you back when there's a little bit more to report in the second phase of the study. Upcoming webinars, we're going to be talking about Lake Erie algal blooms in the next coming week. This is a really interesting topic right now. There's a ton of investment in protecting the Great Lakes. And we're going to be talking about the role that climate change, how climate change is impacting the role of land conservancies in Michigan with one of our member organizations, Legacy Land Conservancy out of